Thank you for joining UCSD San Diego Rady School of Management Value the Veteran event. We started this last year, the Rady Veterans Association, in conjunction with the school to really start doing our work in educating the business community and veterans on the value that veterans bring to the business ecosystem. So we're excited to do this for a second year in a row. We've changed up some of our programming, and we're really excited about what we're going to do. So my name's Ted Pease. I'm the former president of the Rady Veterans Association. Below, you can see Eddie Warwick. He is the new president of the Rady Veterans Association. I just graduated in March, so I'm off to join, leaving the Navy, and I'm off to join the business world here in the next couple months. So we're excited to be able to present this to you, and we're excited to continue this tradition in the coming years as well. So our program schedule is our welcome going on right now. John Perez is going to kick off right around 9:10. He is the head of Veterans Affairs for Johnson & Johnson. We'll take a short break after that and go into our panel discussion. Another short break, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms. The breakout rooms are going to last about 30 minutes-ish, and then we'll bring everybody back in and do our closing session at 12. And at that point, we're going to create random breakout rooms. And so people who want to connect and do a little bit more networking, we're going to keep those breakout rooms open for about 20 minutes. And you're more than welcome to go into those and network and meet some new people. Next slide, please. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, John Perez. He's a former U.S. Army captain and the head of military and veteran affairs for Johnson & Johnson. He's going to be presenting to us the business case for hiring veterans. So he's been doing a ton of incredible work around the country. And Johnson & Johnson truly is a leader for veteran hiring and maintaining those relationships with the veteran community. So we're honored to have John with us, and I will stop talking and turn it over to John. So thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to join you this morning for this great event. Been looking forward to it for a little bit. Hey, we have a great group here. I think this will be mostly interactive, right? So I'm going to go through a few different things now, and then we'll be able to make sure I leave plenty of time really for an interactive discussion, so that everybody gets the most out of what they're hoping to get for the day. So as Ted shared, I'm the head for military and veterans affairs at Johnson & Johnson. I've been in this role for about a year, but heavy in the veteran community for really a long time, from the point of when I transitioned from active duty. So I will, let me jump through here. Right, so a little about me. About 5 years on active duty, stationed in Germany, a couple of Iraq deployments, and then, like a lot of the folks on this call, made the transition by going to a full-time MBA program. Attended Yale School of Management, and that's really where I first got introduced to a lot of the different veteran community activities. I was honored also to lead the SOM Veterans Club while I was on campus, as well as the cross-campus student veteran community. Joined J&J through a leadership development program, spent in my first 5 or 6 years in supply chain and procurement roles, some new product development work, and then more recently, a couple of years within the acquisitions and divestitures community at J&J. This last year, I've been the head for military and veterans affairs. It's been really a wonderful role. J&J, I'm sure many individuals will know the company, right? It's the world's largest, most broadly based healthcare company. We have pharmaceutical, medical device, and consumer healthcare products. What's great about J&J, and I before I move on to really jump into some of the content on the business case for hiring a veteran, it's what's behind me. What's my screen here? What you see is the Johnson & Johnson credo, and we're going to speak later on around values. I know the pre-work for this event and in general is really around knowing yourself and grounding yourself in the values, things that are important to you. For Johnson & Johnson, that's embodied in the credo, which is a document created over 75 years ago, and it speaks to the responsibilities of the company in four broad buckets: for patients and consumers, for our employees, for the communities in which we live and work, and then lastly for our shareholders. For me, my personal journey was really about service, which is why I wanted to go and serve in the Army. I joined Yale School of Management largely because of the school's mission of developing leaders for business and society. That was grounded in what it meant to be a student at that school. and then joined J&J, quite frankly, largely because of the values of the company. So it's very important to me. I think that's one of the things that we'll talk about later. It was part of the pre-work coming into this. So let me jump right in. I'm going to go and sort of ground us in some data first. Then we will, I'll share some tips at the end that I think are relevant both to current veterans looking to make the transition, as well as fellow HR or business professionals or hiring managers. And then we'll just have an open discussion. Before I dive into the demographics, what I would like to say is this population actually has great data. So if you're a business professional and saying, hey, I don't know if I want to go and invest more on the veteran population, well, there's great data for you out there to help you make that business decision. And then the actual business case is actually pretty clear, which we'll get to in a second. But let me start with some demographics. So first, this veteran community, it's large, it's diverse, and it's highly educated. So we say large, well, what does it actually mean? Veterans are about 5.6% of the labor force. There's about 18 million total veterans in the US. And pretty consistently, there's about 200,000 folks a year that transition from active duty to the civilian world, largely with individuals going into employment or entrepreneurship. The second, and this one I at least find often surprises folks, or how highly educated the veteran population is, in particular the post 9/11 generation. They're more likely to have a degree than non-veterans. And when you look at actual student veteran performance, they tend to outperform non-veteran peers. And then the last thing, veterans represent the diversity of the United States. Not a surprise to those of us who are veterans and have served. There's some areas where it doesn't look like the general population, right? The most obvious one is the gender breakdown, right? It's about 80% male to 20% female. Another area, it's not highlighted on this slide, but one that also often catches folks by surprise is, what are the economic backgrounds of the individuals? Veterans, current service members tend to come more from the middle of the economic backgrounds. So folks in the top 20% or the lowest 20% are actually slightly underrepresented in the veteran population. Another one is related to people of color. In particular, you can see some highlighted here, the African-American community, about 17% of the total military force versus about 13% of the overall general population. But the real key takeaway is veterans represent the diversity of the United States. So let's transition. Let's jump into the veteran hiring business case. Great research here. You can see on the bottom of the slide here, I noted just a couple of them. I would call out the great work at the Institute for Veterans and Military Families. If you're ever wondering, hey, where can I go get more information? I would say that's one great organization to start with. Similarly, the Call of Duty Endowment also has done some really great research around the veteran hiring business case, the skills that veterans bring, and certainly some comparative studies, veterans versus non-veterans. All right, so really jumping right into it. Well, veterans have critical in-demand skills and attributes, and these are things that are really are beneficial in anything that someone might want to go do, in any industry, in any function, right? Things like being entrepreneurial, things like having high learning agility, resilience, the ability to develop teams, the ability to work in cross-cultural situations. What I would challenge folks to do is identify an industry or job type where these skills and attributes are not needed. I personally can't really think of any. These are things where really you could go in anything, whether you're going to be a field sales leader, a marketing manager, a supply chain manager, someone leading a shift on a manufacturing floor, working in HR. All of these skills are really relevant. And there's some great research to show that veterans over-index in these specific skills. The second thing is there's, again, great research around retention and performance. And it turns out that if you hold things constant, meaning, say, number of years of experience, the type of role that someone is in, veterans tend to have higher retention and higher performance than do non-veterans. And there's lots of different thinking on why is that the case. It's largely because of the skills and attributes that I just highlighted. Again, higher retention and higher performance, and that's not always the predominant narrative, right? So that's often a surprise for individuals who might think, gosh, I would love to do more veteran hiring, but I'm really concerned about the need to create substantial programming on retention, or I expect this population to have higher turnover. So maybe I don't really want to focus on this area. The data tends to suggest that retention and performance are higher, so those are not things to be concerned about. Now, there are subgroups within that where it might be more relevant to have specialized differentiated programming, say on things like retention. That would be something like a great employee resource group. At Johnson & Johnson, we're really happy to have an organization called our Johnson & Johnson Veteran Leadership Council, which is the ERG, the Employee Resource Group, really for the broader military community. And that has some great programming to bring people in to help with mentorship, to give them opportunities to give back to the community, to give them opportunities for exposure to individuals they wouldn't normally interact with on a day-to-day basis. So for those veterans who really self-identify as a veteran and want to go spend time with the community, there is that outlet for them. And having strong, in this case, having a strong employee resource group is one of the things that can help to even enhance the already high retention. The next thing I would call out is this idea of high ROI hiring channels. A lot of work went in during the Great Recession, right? The recession back in 2007 and 2008, really across government, across the nonprofit community, the VSO, the Veteran Serving Organization community, and the private sector, to not have the challenges that we had at that period of time when veteran unemployment and underemployment were substantially higher than the general population, labor force participation lower than the general population. Some programs were created, many programs were created during that, and over the last decade plus, many of the strong programs have grown, and the ones that were sort of being tested out sort of have fallen by the wayside. So what we're left with now, really some wonderful programs. I could speak more about those in a little bit, some great organizations. But when you look at the last couple of years, what was the result of all these new programs and channels that were created? Veteran unemployment was lower than the general population. The unemployment for the general population, and that's the actual case right now as well, even in this COVID employment environment. One program, again, we could revisit this in questions if it's of interest later on, but one program to call out would be the Department of Defense Skill Bridge program, where individuals are able to go and work with an employer in that last 6 months of their active duty time. Again, great way for some employers to approach it in the try before you buy model. Great for the individuals to likewise do that, right? You can do something where it's not, gosh, I'm really locked into this business for the next couple of years because I don't want it to appear on my resume of, well, I tried this company out, it wasn't for me, and now I've departed, but that makes me look risky on a resume. Well, you can do your skill bridge program rotation in a way that also lets you as an individual employee go and try. So it's really beneficial across the board for the individual transitioning veteran, great for the employer, and then frankly, great for the Department of Defense, because it'll help drive down unemployment for the transitioning service member population, and great for all of us. So just one example, and there are many others, which again, we could revisit in a couple minutes here. So just a couple personal reflections and best practices that I like to share. And I think this is applicable both to the veteran population, but also for employers to think about. Hey, it starts with the know thyself, right? That was the pre-work here. Think about the things that are important to you. Think about your values. What do you want to go do as an individual? You really have to start there before you develop what your underlying or your overarching strategy is going to be for employment, and then what specific tactics you're going to go and employ. What I have found interesting over the last year in particular, where I'm having many more conversations with folks who are transitioning service members, it's the individual who comes in and says, I can do anything, and I'm interested in lots of things. And then for me, as an individual who's at a company with more than 130,000 employees around the world, again, 3 broad sectors, my response to that is usually, okay, well, as an employer, I have everything, but today I'm actually only hiring for this one thing. This is the job that's out there. And so what do I mean by that? It's employers can't really serve as the specific mentor to help a veteran or a transitioning service member figure out, hey, here's the thing that's most meaningful to you as a transitioning service member. That's really not the role that we play. There's some great organizations out there that can help figure that out, but that's really the starting point. And if you're not there, showing up to an employer and saying, hey, I've got great skills, I can do everything, or I can do anything rather, and I'm interested in lots of things, that doesn't really help the employer. The employer says, well, gosh, great. We have everything. We've got all of these different roles out there. Tell us, is there any of these that you would like to go do? So I always start with that know thyself. I was really happy to see that was the pre-work that we used for this as well, really grounding in values. The second thing, and this is again relevant for everybody, it's this idea of navigating the sea of goodwill. Some people might be familiar with that expression from Admiral Mullen. The idea that there are so many organizations that are out there supporting veterans, transitioning service members, military families. One statistic I've often heard repeated is that there are more than 65,000 veteran-focused nonprofits out there, many of which are focused on employment or economic issues in particular. They're not all created equally. Some are better than others, and it is a challenge to go out and really navigate that. So really starting with trust organizations and working with those is so important. But I think it's helpful to just recognize that there is this massive sea of goodwill, and you really need to pick this organization as a true value add, or this organization is more relevant to me. The next thing I would make reference to is thinking in terms of industry and then function. So as you think about, what do I want to go do? I think that's always a helpful framework to use to say, okay, these are the areas, these are my values, these are the areas that I want to go focus on. To try to bring that to life, I'll share a little bit about my own transition. I was certainly one of those folks that was very confident I could kind of go do anything post active duty military. And then when I was at my graduate program, I thought, boy, I could sort of go in any direction I want. And for me, it was first focusing, okay, like what will help me get out of bed in the morning? Well, when I was in the Army, it was to lead soldiers. Now I'm not doing that anymore. Or maybe I'm doing it in a reserve capacity, but I need something else for my full-time employment. So what exactly is that thing? And then I thought in terms of industry, and really focused on the healthcare industry. I thought, gosh, I could feel good going into work every day, knowing that the work that I'm doing is supporting patients and healthcare providers meet those unmet patient needs, or more effectively meet patient needs. You just feel good when you're contributing to something like that. And that's not a knock on any other industry. I hope people feel that same sense of satisfaction for any work that they do, and they get that, and that gets them out of bed. It's very, very personal. For me, that was an area that I thought was very interesting. And I thought I could really feel that sense of purpose and fulfillment going in that industry. And the second thing I thought of was, okay, what type of work would I like to go do? What function? For me, that started in the broader supply chain community, partly because I just like the idea of seeing things from raw material to an end product in someone's hand and sort of being part of that. But again, it's a very personal decision. But thinking through that will then help you navigate that big sea of goodwill. An example might be, so if a veteran comes to me and says, hey, I'm really interested in healthcare, John, I'll say, great, I've got a great organization for you. Why don't you go talk to MedTech Vets, a nonprofit that is highly focused on transitioning service members looking for employment or to enhance their careers in life sciences industry. Or if they say, hey, I'm really interested in supply chain, right, then I can give them, say, an organization like Heroes Make America, again, focused on veterans, in this case, going very specifically in the manufacturing portion of the supply chain community. The next thing to think about is just maintaining a positive mindset throughout this, right? The transition, it's incredibly challenging to go from full-time active duty military service to whatever your next career journey will be. That's a challenging period of time. It's even more challenging for the military, for folks coming from the military, because it's also going to be challenging on your family, right? You may be going through moves, there are other things that are going on. It's important for employers to think through that as well, of, hey, this is not just someone who, think of my own industry as maybe coming from another large pharmaceutical company in the same territory or geography, and is now just transitioning to another. This is a person who may be a function switcher, an industry switcher, and switching geographies. That's tough for everybody. So, keeping a positive mindset, recognizing how challenging that is, but staying positive throughout, really important. At the same time, it's about never maintaining an entitled mindset or creating an entitled mindset. I'm reminded of one of the first pieces of advice that I received, maybe on like day one post training with my first unit on active duty, and speaking to my first platoon sergeant. and him telling me, hey, as a junior officer, as an officer, you're always going to be treated a little bit better than everybody else, right? And that just kind of comes with the nature of having a higher rank or a higher position. But never expect that better treatment, because it's the expectation of better or differentiated treatment that will change your behavior and how you interact with other people. So if you start with the expectation, without that expectation of, gosh, I'm this, I'm a veteran, I'm a hero, I've just done all of these great things, and employers or the country owes it to me and my family for the sacrifice we just made. The country does owe it to our veterans to go and serve them. Employers do owe it, right? I'm not saying that's not the case. It's just, if you flip the mindset a little bit and you don't expect that going in, it sort of changes the way that you approach all your different interactions. The next thing, this one's getting a little bit tactical, but it's this idea of translating your experiences. Great to be able to say, hey, here's what I did and why it's relevant to this next industry, this next function. That's an expectation, not just of someone who's transitioning from the military to civilian employment. That's an expectation for somebody who's going from the manufacturing world or supply chain world to a sales role. Right? Hey, here's what I did on the manufacturing floor and why it will be relevant in this new type of work. So translating experiences, absolutely relevant. For military folks, there's this perennial question of how much should I translate? How military-like should I still leave my resume? It's one of those I'll know it when I see it things. But what I would say is not too much. If somebody who was in the military is reading your resume and cannot tell if you were in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, or if you were a general officer, a captain, an Army captain, or a specialist, there's probably an issue, right? You've probably translated too much and so civilianized it that no one quite understands what you're doing. So it's a fine line of, yes, you need to translate, but it probably shouldn't be so far that someone who just came from working with you wouldn't even recognize what your resume says any longer. And then the last thing I would leave with is this idea of avoiding cliches. The people often talk about the military population as either heroes or victims, and we don't want to play into that. That's not helpful for anybody. There were certainly individuals within the population who were victims. There were certainly individuals within this population that were heroes, and that's true for every population. But that is certainly a broader narrative that you see in society. Playing into that, I don't think is a helpful thing, right? So speak to your truth and your experiences, but as best as possible, I would always say, avoid very cliched language around your experiences. If it's true for you, then it's not a cliche, and that's fine, right? Always speak your own truth. But as best as possible, I think you should really make it about you and not sort of broad generalizations about the broader population. So with that was sort of my few-minute overview of a few different thoughts and some rounding on the population. Happy to take this conversation however we all benefit most. So I'll stop sharing the screen and we'll go from there. But thanks again to the Rady team, Ted, especially for reaching out and our conversations leading up to this. It's been an honor and a privilege. So thank you.
Thanks so much, John. Hey, for our participants, please throw questions in the chat box or throw your hand up, and we'll do our best to grab you if you have questions and like to have a little bit further discussions here. All right, John, I'll ask a question to start it off. Doing the transitioning vet thing. What have you found successful at J&J in order to help teach hiring managers or teach your HR team how to structure, whether it be job descriptions, requirements, or conversations in their hiring process to understand that, hey, I might not have a marketing background, but you can plug me in a marketing manager role, and I'm going to figure it out pretty quick and be a successful addition to your team?
No, great, yeah, great question. So for us, it certainly has started with this idea of grounding in facts and data first, so that people really understand what is this business case, right? So the first thing for us has really been that. And I think too often the narrative historically was like, hey, we should do more to hire veterans because it's just good. It's the right thing to do for the country, or gosh, we feel bad for this population, so let's go do more. We've really been focused now on just explaining, hey, here's the business case. Go do this because this is a sound business practice. and then go do this because, frankly, the channels are so efficient now, especially compared to what they were, a decade ago, that these are lower cost to acquire channels than some others. So from that, it then goes into, frankly, leaning into things that we're already doing and we should be doing from a standpoint of interviewing. Things like, hey, focus on behavioral-based interviews. Don't invent your own non-validated questions, just thinking you're so great at doing interviews. Lean into behavioral-based interviews, which are more broader skill focused. It's not to say we don't have a need for technical questions and that those exist in interviews, and they're still behavioral based, but really leaning into best practices for interviewing is incredibly relevant to this population and is relevant to any population that's making a bigger transition, a transition from one function or one industry to another. And then the last thing on job descriptions, certainly leaning into pulling back hiring managers from using the writing of a job description as just an exercise in them describing themselves. So what do I mean by that, right? If you're a hiring manager and you're just going to go out and you haven't hired anybody in a year, maybe it's your first time with that team, and then said, oh, well, great, you can now hire someone, or an additional person on your team. What do they end up doing? They usually end up just describing themselves and think, well, gosh, before I took that role I used to be in, I did it for 4 years. So I guess you need 4 years of experience is required. Or I have an engineering degree. I guess an engineering degree is required for this role. So pulling hiring managers sort of back from that and thinking more base principles, very, very relevant to this community. And then there's some other specialized things that you certainly can do, especially around degree equivalency for certain ranks within the military. Johnson & Johnson has certainly done more on providing some alternatives for individuals as they write job descriptions to allow military equivalency. Degree equivalency is one example. Another one might be certifications. If you were doing IT network engineering things in the military, but for whatever reason don't have a technical cert there, but you've been doing the exact job, we don't necessarily need to write the job description that says that certification is required. We could say it's required, or if you've been doing this in the military, you can come in. You've met that minimum requirement. So there's a handful of things that you could do there, but I would say the things that are relevant for any other transitioning from a function or industry to another is going to be relevant for the veteran population.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. So first question that we got in, what was the biggest myth that you discovered was not true once you transitioned?
The biggest myth that was not true. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm a little stumped there. I would say the biggest myth that I thought was not true would be really around that I somehow didn't understand how to work in a matrix environment in this sort of decentralized model, right? That somehow the military is so command and control because it's so clear this person is my commander, that is her commander, and that's the next level commander, right? Like we know only hierarchical models in the military, and I wouldn't be able to transition in a world where everything is highly matrixed. That was just totally not true. Relationships were just as important in the military, in my experience, as they were at Johnson & Johnson. Now, I think there's a continuum, and the corporate world may be certainly more matrixed, maybe even more relationship based, but I think the skills that I developed in the military of how do I lead individuals and teams, how do I influence others, how do I develop people, how do I build relationships and then leverage that is just as applicable in the private sector. But I probably personally didn't quite realize that I had all of that. And then I certainly, now that I work with others within the business, they sort of default to this idea of, well, the military is so command and control, there's no way that they're going to be relevant to be an influential person within our organization. They're not going to navigate it, and that's certainly not a true statement.
Awesome. So our next question comes from Sean. Does J&J comes from Bill. What is the biggest reason veterans leave an employer prematurely?
Yeah, good question, Bill. I'm sure there's plenty of great data on this. So let me speak to some of the things that I suspect are the case. And I would actually start with, it's probably for all of the same reasons that a non-veteran would leave an employer in general, right? So sort of not having a great manager, right? People often don't leave organizations, they leave their boss. So I think not having a strong management and good leadership within the organization typically ends up being one of the top things. But I think it's, again, there are more things that unite us and are commonality between veterans and non-veterans than not. So the standard, hey, do I feel valued at work? Do I feel like I'm contributing? Do I have good benefits and compensation? Am I able to be my whole self at work and at home? And is my employer enabling it? Those things are constant for everybody. Certainly for some transitioning veterans, I think what you may see is, hey, they really weren't ready to make that big switch, or they made the wrong choice in what they want to go do next. So in that recently transition, hey, this is my first civilian job, I think you see a little bit more of people leave then because they just made the wrong decision. It just wasn't the right organization culturally for them. Maybe it wasn't the right line of work to go into. In that segment of the population, certainly I think it's more often than not, it's the individual probably made a wrong choice. I think there are things companies can do to really make sure that they're providing as much information up front. So I think of less, hey, they're in the door and now they've departed. I think the work for an employer is more, are you giving enough information to the individual to make the right choice up front? Are you really clear? Did you give those individuals an opportunity to interview you so that they understand the culture, they understand the type of work that they're now jumping into that is different than what they used to be doing? I would say focus much more on that than some of the later stage stuff. It's not to say the later stage stuff is unimportant. You should be able to do things that are like mentoring to help that massive transition into a new work. You should do things that are like differentiated onboarding for a recently transitioned veteran compared to to all the other employees on board. But if I had to put if I had an extra dollar to invest with that eye of retention, I would do more of that dollar to the upfront recruitment stage so that you're really giving individuals the right information to make an informed choice on, hey, this is the right place and the right specific role for me to go work in.
Awesome. So our next question is from Sean, does J&J hire through website or networking? The hiring process through the job portal seems a mystery.
That's the standard comment for everyone. There's many other I see some of my colleagues who are working in other companies also smiling on when that question came up. Yeah, listen, job portals can feel like the black box, right? Not having human interaction is an impersonal thing. With that said, you have to have a fair, open, equal opportunity hiring process. So you cannot get around the idea of, hey, there is a formal way to apply to an organization. How can an individual help themselves throughout that process? Certainly networking and building relationships, working with other organizations are very important. But every company has to maintain some standard process that anybody can go and apply for, right? That is one that's just the right thing to do. It's also the law. So it does feel impersonal, but it is a requirement. So helping through networking, through relationship building, incredibly important. And for Johnson & Johnson, we certainly invest in organizations where we can have conversations and have engagement with individuals who may want to become candidates. I happen to mention two of the organizations we work with of Heroes Make America and MedTech Vets, which are, again, focused on transitioning service member population in particular, looking for roles within our industry. Well, how do we get engaged in that? We have individuals who are mentors through it. We go to different training events that they're holding, right? Those are all ways to go build relationships that will then support the individual as they're going to go and formally apply to the company. And it's going to make them better candidates for employment at our company because they're going to know more about the organization. They'll be more informed about the type of work and their specific fit into the org. There is no way to get around this idea of you have to have some sort of standard way where everybody can apply. It's really incumbent on the candidate to do everything that she or he can to make themselves more competitive throughout it. One last thought on this: it's a lot of the conversations I have with the transitioning service members are, hey, we're looking for the best candidate. yes, you're 100% qualified for the role that you just applied for, but you know what? I just got 100 other applicants for role X that you just shared for, and all 100 of them were qualified, but we're only hiring, say, one, right? So are you really confident that you're the number one person in that? So there's definitely a difference between being qualified and being the absolute best for it. And it's can certainly be frustrating. I've received 300 more rejections than I have acceptances or successes on the many different roles I've had. I think I've had six. I think this is role 6 for me now. It's in my almost 9 years at Johnson & Johnson, right? Way more rejections than I have acceptances, but it is certainly a frustrating and challenging experience. And it all goes back to having to maintain that positive mindset.
And little piggyback, LinkedIn's a powerful tool. So if you see a job description, type that job description into LinkedIn, and you'll find somebody that's doing it at that company. And then you just send them a message and you start talking, and they introduce you to 20 different people, and you're able to have a face to a name pretty quickly. And I've found, especially at J&J, people love talking to vets, and they will talk to you in a second. So it's a great company to network into. Next question's from Natalie. John, reflecting on your personal journey, how can a university and its corporate partners better support veterans in this transition?
Yeah, I think going back to that knowing thyself, helping individuals understand what are their values, what are they strong at, what are they weak at, and where they want to ultimately go, right? Like that understanding your own career journey, where you'd like to go, is so important. And that experience while someone's a full-time student in particular, and the close relationship with careers or the development of the career office, is just so important. So really grounding students so they're able to then focus down. Here's the area that I want to work in, or another way to think of it could be not so much here's what I definitely want to work in. Maybe it's here's exactly what I don't want to work in. I'm not spending any time, and I'm still narrowing in other ways. Right? But that is so incredibly important. The other thing, with the university directly to the employer, I think it's very important to help focus the company's attention. There's going to be a couple hundreds or dozens of individuals on campus that the companies could be engaging with. Focus us, help us understand, the students better than we do. Being able to say, hey, here, these 3 people, incredibly interested. I'm sure that they will apply, and I know them that they will be strong candidates for you. So help us navigate the student population as well. I've always seen that better performing careers offices tend to do that, where they're able to say, here are the students that we think you should focus on for the following roles, rather than sort of the broad shotgun blast of have an event, great, touch all of our students, and it's like, oh, okay, great, and maybe a couple of them will be hits. But if you could really help us, say like, yeah, have the broad event, but oh, by the way, make sure you talk to the following 3 people, because they are really very specifically interested in your industry and your specific company.
Yeah, Phil Dana, one of our awesome panelists coming up here, put at the bottom, universities can help by facilitating director plus level interactions, even better if C-suite. Relationships at that level will produce a bigger ROI for the transitioning vets and students than junior level recruiter and HR professionals.
Yeah, it's such a good, I'm looking forward to Phil's comments later, but could not agree more with that, right? Like it really has to be the decision maker, the hiring manager, right? The recruiter is there to help and support and guide individuals into the hiring manager, but really getting the right level engagement, so incredibly important.
Awesome. So this one's from Ryan. Thank you, John. In regards to navigating through all the goodwill, does J&J prefer some transition nonprofits over others? I think you mentioned 2, Heroes Make America and Tech Vets. I know I met with your group through 4Block, so yep. another good transition program. But if you have any different ones.
Yeah, no, those are great. We also work with Hiring Our Heroes and Hire Heroes USA. Both good organizations. I think most people have heard of Hiring Our Heroes because they're so massive, right? Huge database, but also because of their corporate fellowship program, which is an authorized skill bridge provider. So both of those great organizations. One we don't directly work with, but I've always heard great things. There's an organization called Casey, very similar to Hire Heroes USA, another one that I've heard some positive things. And then the last one that I would call out would be American Corporate Partners, which doesn't have a direct connection into to employment, but it's sort of implied that there's going to be that engagement there because it's a direct one-on-one mentor protege relationship for about a year-long period of time. I think they do a great job of really matching and making sure that it's the appropriate mentor. Right? Why do so many mentorship programs fail? Because it has the magic hat model, or they have the magic hat model. Who's going to be my mentor? Let me pull out of the hat whatever names happen to be there that you're going to get. And you don't necessarily have a good fit by geography, personal background, personality, aspirations, education. They spend a lot to ensure, hey, are we matching the right person seeking mentorship with the right person seeking to serve as a mentor. So those would be a few of the different organizations. Again, there's thousands of them. Looking for those ones that I think have that overlap with functions that you need within your business or within your industry vertical, I think are really important as well, right? So great to do some of the generalist ones like hiring our heroes, but if there are those ones within a specific industry or a specific geography, if you're a small to medium-sized company, also very, very important.
Okay, and I accidentally skipped one a little higher up, but it comes from Robert. Thank you, John. I'm curious, what do you love most about supply chain, and what traits might a veteran have that would result in enjoyment with this path?
Yeah, let me take the second part first. I think veterans tend to be extremely practical. Or while you're in the service, you tend to be practical. You get it. You have to accomplish your mission. It's not always sort of esoteric philosophical discussions. It's the rubber meets the road as a service member, and so I think, frankly, that is it's not a trait that you see in everybody. So from a skill set, I would say that's really important. From why for me was it interesting? I love that I could both see the big picture in that, again, from raw material to the transformation of those materials to assembly of the final good to getting into someone's hand and then understanding how it's being used, to be able to see the big picture and at the same time be able to dive in and say, all right, I'm really focused on, I don't know, who's the best manufacturer that's best going to be able to, to bring all of this together highly efficiently, effectively, to be able to both see big picture and then super dive in and see how the transformation that's occurring at that phase or that step of the process makes an end difference to the customer. It is, for me, I just really enjoyed that part of it, both big picture and then really seeing how my part of the process is directly attributing back to that product, either in a patient's hand or a healthcare professional's hand.
Awesome. All right, so this one's a little bit long, John, so I'm going to read it, and this may be our last question.
Sure.
This is from Jason, our former VP of the Rady Veterans Association. Said, you mentioned strong organizational commitment, which I would file under loyalty. Have you noticed whether or not veterans tend to stay around organizations longer than their civilian counterparts, as the statement implies? If so, how profound would you say it is? The angle I'm curious about is the ROI for a veteran hire who may stick around longer and see challenges through.
Yeah, listen, the data is actually pretty clear. Retention for veterans higher than non-veterans. Again, holding things constant, like so you're comparing same job types and things like that. So you really do see that this idea of organizational commitment and loyalty translating over into retention. So it is real. Now that depends on what the industry is, right? So turnover in a sales role, for example, or sales family of roles may be higher than, I don't know, let's say an HR family, job family, right? But overarching, that retention tends to be higher, does come through, and that there's a very clear ROI to that, right? All of our businesses, HR departments think about the implications of attrition and turnover and things like that. So in this case, the data is really clear. I do think organizational commitment is part of it, but I think organizational commitment also goes beyond, hey, the average person stays in the role X for 2 years and veterans stay into it for 2.2 years or whatever it would be for a specific job family. Organizational commitment is more, hey, is this person going to really inculcate the values of the organization, believe in those values, and then go and deliver for the organization as a whole, right? Or are you really seeing it's not just, hey, I'm part of manufacturing line X and I'm doing this, but here's what the overarching organization is doing. I'm going to go out and solve problems that are for the overarching organization. It's more that feeling of being part of a single team and giving back to the broader community. That is, I think, incredibly important. And that goes beyond just, hey, they stay longer, they're retained longer. It's more, they're part of the team. They see themselves as part of the team, and then they're able to give back more and in a differentiated way to other employees who don't feel that same sense of belonging to the organization.
Great. And here's our last question before our break time. John, this is from Christina. John, thank you for your time. Follow up on an earlier question. What do you feel that veterans are most important apprehensive about as they begin their transition? So what's the number one apprehension they have as they start? I think is what.
Yeah, I'll share. I don't necessarily know that it's always the most, right? Because it's always going to be for an individual. But the one that I tend to hear the most about, and then we'll challenge the individuals. It's the idea of the lack of technical knowledge. So they tend to, in my experience, they tend to be acutely aware of, gosh, I don't have in your industry experience. I don't have pharmaceutical experience right now, or gosh, I'm going to be the second shift supervisor on manufacturing line Y, and I've never done that before. And they'll, so that they're just quite apprehensive over that. And then they allow that apprehensive status to change and alter their behavior, where they'll take a step back and not do the things that they would normally do with respect to leading teams. And so what I often will talk about with folks as they're making the transition is, you're right, you don't have the technical knowledge here, but you didn't have the technical knowledge for the 3 other roles that you were doing in the military either. And what did you do? You relied on subject matter experts to give you the technical knowledge where it was needed. You quickly learned. You have learning agility. You've demonstrated that throughout your career. So be confident in yourself that you're going to go learn this new industry, this new area. But don't forget that we hired you for a reason. We did hire you knowing that you're coming from a different industry, that you're coming from a different functional area. And we want that different way of thinking so that you can go and challenge some of the existing norms. We want some of that leadership experience so that you can come in and say, hey, this doesn't seem right, or it's not safe. Hey, I want to challenge this for that way. Maybe I'm wrong because I don't have the technical knowledge on this, but it didn't pass my common sense test, and I'm going to go and challenge it, right? We want that different thinking. And I think people, one of the things that I tend to see is this apprehension of, gosh, I don't have the knowledge in this area. Let me take a step back and totally change the way I behave as a professional and as a leader. When we really want you to lean into, hey, I'm coming from a different area. Let me bring some insights from this. Let me do the same thing I did every other time of, I'm going to trust subject matter experts. I'm going to pull on them. I'm going to ask the tough, right questions, and I'm going to go learn this new one. But for me, that's one that tends to stand out quite a bit. And I often will tell the veterans at J&J, really lean into your past experiences. That's why we hired you. We want diverse perspectives. We want diverse functional and industry backgrounds so that we can go and get better.
Awesome, John. Thanks so much. I think that was an awesome way to end this part of our program. Folks, John Perez, he's on LinkedIn. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to accept a few more friends on there. And thank you so much for your time and your participation and all the great bits of wisdom you had for us.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to the rest of the conversation with all my great colleagues.
The idea here is John really talked to us about the business case for hiring veterans, talked to us about some skills for transition. And then now this is a part with a panel with people who have transitioned or transition experts or people who are actively hiring. And we're going to talk about good news stories about here's what's worked when I've transitioned. Here's what's worked when I've hired veterans. And here's how I'm approaching these topics. What's really great is when we were doing our check earlier in the week, conversations that Robert had versus what Justin had were 2 different ways at looking the same at the same exact thing. So we're talking about understanding the corporate culture to gauge how you approach the hiring manager, and really doing your homework before you get in there as the veteran to start the job hunt process. So this is going to be a fantastic panel moderated by Linda Kurtz, who is our rock star careers coach for Rady. She works primarily with the flex weekend and flex evening folks. So she's going to be moderating our panel. Justin Wells is a former naval pilot, flew helicopters. He's also the CEO of Interlaced. We've got Phil Dana, who's the head of HR at Endrion. He also helped found the Honor Foundation, which is a San Diego-based organization that helps naval special warfare folks transition from active duty to the civilian workforce. And then we have Robert Jarvis, who's a program manager of diversity and inclusion at Intel. He's also been a long-term employee of Intel. And we're really excited to have you all here. So thank you so much for your time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda.
Thank you, Ted. I really appreciate that. And I have to say, John, that was such a thorough first round with us today. Thank you so much. A lot of really great content came out in that conversation. So I think now our challenge is to go deeper, right? To dive deeper and get a little more thick into the weeds, as they say. I am super excited to be here with all of you today. And those of you who don't know, that haven't been our campus before, behind me is our Rady School of Management campus. Hopefully next year we'll be doing this on campus and not Zoom for our third annual Value of the Veterans. So hope to see you again next year. As Ted mentioned, I work in a career advisory capacity at the Rady School of Management with the flex evening and weekend students, and I'm also available to alumni. And that is where most of our veteran students reside, is in the flex evening and weekend program. So let's get started here. The focus of our panel today is really on those discoveries that were made while getting hired as a veteran, or from the perspective of a hiring manager or a human resources executive in looking to hire veterans into their organization. I also want to encourage you all to stick around for the breakout room, because we'll be going even deeper in that session. So Ted has already given us a really brief introduction to the panelists. I'm going to give the panelists each a chance to go a little bit deeper on their own introduction, telling us about where they're working, a little bit about their company, how they got there, maybe how they got there before that, before we jump into a little deeper conversation. And this is a conversation. It's not me asking questions one at a time. I hope all of you will just jump into each other's comments, maybe ask each other questions amongst you as panelists. And at the end of the time, we are reserving questions for our audience. Ted will be managing those while we're going through the panel conversation, but we do have time at the end for our audience. So please start preparing your questions for our panelists. So let's go ahead and start with Justin. Justin, could you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little more deeply about who you are and your role in your company? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Linda. So I started my career after graduating from the Naval Academy and went to become a naval aviator. At the Naval Academy, I was a computer scientist, and I was a pretty poor computer scientist. Like, I was not a great coder. I was not great, but learned how to fit systems and processes together. Spent 10 years in the Navy flying helicopters. Part of that journey, I really likened to an entrepreneurship type of role, taking teams, building teams together, setting sail, not knowing where we're going to go, the problem set changes and the mission changes, and so being able to pivot. And that got me really, really hooked into this kind of concept of small team leadership and entrepreneurship. I was nearing the end of my career and realized that I was super interested in business, but I had never been in a meeting where we talked about money. So I was like, I should probably understand that if this money is pretty important in business, so I should probably go and learn. I found the Rady School and fell in love with the Rady School. I found it just transformative to my life and my career. And so spent a couple of years at the Rady School getting understanding about business. Ended up launching a business as part of the Starter program in lab to market at UC San Diego. We worked on that business while I was finishing my time in the Navy. At the end of that, we decided to shut the business down. And so I called Linda and was like, Linda, we just shut down our business. I've got a few weeks until I'm out of in the Navy. And so we started figuring out a transition plan. Ended up getting a role at Intuit in business development. It was not something I had set my eye on, but it just something that translated to my skills and passions and things like that. And I found it just a great career. Spent about 3 years at Intuit in strategic partnerships and business development. Got to work with a bunch of different companies, got to learn a bunch of different industries, kind of flex at all levels inside the business. And then decided in 2019 to set off and do my own business. About 4 days into that journey in the garage with sticky notes and whiteboards, the phone rang from a recruiter and they were looking for a CEO to take over an established business. And so I kind of took off the startup hat and then put on the private equity CEO hat, and been here for almost 2 years at Interlaced. Absolutely love the company. I got really attracted to the company. They have a niche at the time when I was interviewing, found that they had a niche market. We do Apple IT for small businesses, creatives, startups, nonprofits. Really well positioned to grow in the market, and then just a fantastic team. And so I fell in love with the company through the interview process, took the job, and then we haven't looked back. And so we've been growing really well over the last few years, maturing the operational and the administrative side of the business. We've always had an amazing service delivery. So kind of shoring up all the business processes and then focusing on growth. So that's my story.
Quite a journey, quite a journey. Robert, you want to bring us up to date on you?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with my Intel experience. I've been with Intel almost 7 years. I came in as a hire to our supply chain program out of Arizona State. I have worked in helping shape diversity strategy when it comes to university recruitment, diversity strategy as it relates to retention of employees, and I have now taken on the responsibility for our veterans hiring program. I also am the program manager for our disabilities hiring program at Intel. Kind of prior to coming to Intel, I've had the opportunity to work with veterans over the course of my career, and I've always been personally impressed. The first veteran that I ever got the opportunity to work with, I was a waiter in college, and I had another waiter that had been discharged from the Navy, and he went on to become the longest serving volunteer during the Hurricane Katrina episode through the Red Cross. And that always stuck out to me about the quality of an individual that it takes to serve in the military. I have 4 grandfathers who served in the military. I spent a lot of time in my childhood navigating between Fort Eustis, Fort Gordon, and other bases during my time with them. And I have had the opportunity to directly manage veterans. I was working in warehousing. I was a manager for Walmart Logistics, and many of my employees were veterans. And I noticed something different as a manager when it comes to that interaction. And I've also been a military contractor working to help soldiers get ready to transition to go back to school. So through that lens, I've kind of seen, whether you're talking corporate, whether you're talking management interaction, or even peer-to-peer, the different ways that veterans show up. And I can say nothing but positive things. It's kind of interesting to hear the presentation earlier with John, and I was just like, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, is it really a question about ROI? Is almost it's almost absurd to think about when you look at the values that come out of that military experience, and also the attributes and characteristics of people who decide to go down that path. So very passionate about driving that veteran representation. We have a very active and engaged employee resource group at Intel. It breaks down into kind of 2 areas. We have a senior leadership version where senior leaders that are veterans and focused on veteran advocacy, the Intel Veteran Leadership Council. And we also have a American Veterans at Intel, which is everyone who's not a senior leader, who's a veteran at Intel, that's working to drive for advocacy and also a sense of transition into the workforce. So I am very pleased with our company's commitment to that, and I hope many folks are as well. And it's something very exciting. So.
Thank you. I will look forward to hearing more about the differences that you notice in veterans, and maybe even a little bit more about that transition success into the organization. But Phil, let's hear a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, thanks, Linda.
Sure.
Special connection with Rady, who housed the Honor Foundation in the corner closet on the top floor for a while. So every man in my family has been a sailor or a Marine all the way back to Richard Henry Dana of Dana Point. I was enlisted. First, I was a dependent of a 30-year warrant officer who served in Korea and Vietnam, and my grandpa was a Marine at Iwo Jima. So I know nothing but military and veterans. I was enlisted in Desert Shield, Desert Storm as an AW3 tucked in the back of a helicopter, and then survived the Naval Academy as the old dude in my class, and then was a surface warfare guy. So I got out and transitioned through one of the military headhunting firms, I had a senior vice president who had started an effort to hire military in a Fortune company, and I was one of the early guinea pigs. And I think that lesson should be highlighted to have a sea daddy in your first or second job to make sure that you're pointed in the right direction, and you get that candid feedback that your civilian counterparts or the soft, fuzzy HR folks are afraid to give you. At least in a way that you'll actually hear it. I've had a phenomenal career in HR, I would think. I've helped build companies like Amazon. I was at Intuit as well. Life Technologies here in town, where I learned M&A and global, and we sold to Thermo for $14 billion. I'm currently at Dendreon as the head of HR, so this is my first C-suite role. I finally made it. It was a goal of mine for quite a while. We're a prostate cancer at the tip of the spear of life science as a cell gene therapy and immunotherapy company. It's the fastest growing segment of life sciences in the world. I got my job because the former CEO is a former Army officer. And I think that was one of my chats is I've got a unique counter to some of John's advice where I've never applied. I've never showed my resume in a first interaction for any job I've ever gotten. And so my advice is a little unique. I've hired 42,000 veterans, 1,850 academy grads, and over 800 spec ops. Those are the only three categories I've kept track. I've got lots of Air Force jokes if anyone wants to hear them. So that's me in a nutshell. My wife, I'll mention her as well. She helped start and run the Service Academy career conferences and Military Mojo. So one day in Savannah, I wanted resumes and I got a wife.
That's a great story. And it's all in the family there, multi-generational. And I'm going to say you hired 42,000 veterans, pretty phenomenal. A shout out to that for sure. So how we're going to structure this conversation, we're going to break it into three. We're going to start with Justin, and we're going to talk about the perspective of being a veteran who does transition and make that change to the corporate world, whether it's entrepreneurial or starting a business. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the perspective of being a hiring manager and hiring veterans into your organization, and then bring it home with a conversation of HR. How do we have that conversation with our HR to encourage them to look at a veteran and hire a veteran into the organization? So I'll have the conversation sort of split out in three ways. I'm going to start the conversation with each one of you, but I would like all of you to please chime in so that we can have just a nice, healthy conversation. So I want to start with you, Justin, and take the perspective of the veteran who's transitioning, either active duty or already transitioned and making a career move. And it really, for anyone in our audience that's contemplating a career move, some of this definitely applies. So what do you think worked for you, Justin, to make that transition?
Yeah, I think the two things that worked really well, I think resourcefulness and preparation. And on resourcefulness, it's really just keeping stock of all the things you have in your inventory that can help you on that, make better decisions, know what's available, and just really reach out, use all the things that at your disposal. And so resourcefulness for me is a key skill that I look for when hiring anybody, and especially veterans, something that pops out. But I want, in my organization, and I think it's true in most organizations, you want people who can solve problems efficiently, quickly. And so resourcefulness for me was one of the things that translated really, really well. And then preparation, I think preparation for the interview, preparation for the first interaction, understanding the business, understanding the values, understanding the culture and the people, talking to people in the organization ahead of time, getting a really good understanding of what makes the organization tick and thrive. That was huge for me getting into Intuit. Just studying, preparing for the interview, getting a sense. So when you show up, you feel like you fit. You feel like you already belong. That was huge for me. And then day one, week one, preparation, showing up, understanding you're going into a meeting with 20 people, who's on the calendar, what are their job titles, can you learn about any projects they've done, what are their current priorities, and trying to get a sense of all of that, because Otherwise, you just show up and you sit back and you're a fly on the wall and you need to observe. And so preparation for me is a way to accelerate the transition into the organization, and then like how to accelerate your impact once you're there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Got to be prepared. You got to be the candidate who did their homework.
Yeah.
Phil, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Justin did a good job on it. I've always said I've really crafted the art of researching the company as I go into interviews, whether it's, and in the questions when they say, do you have a question for me? Using that moment to shine, because it's usually at the end of the interview, and psychology would say it's how you enter the door and how you leave the door in the interview that matters. The middle of the sandwich is just a bonus. And so, say something like, hey, in the last 2 years, in the 8 quarterly financial statements that I've read, I noticed this, and I see potential acquisition, and I notice that your savings are depleting. Is that a concern for the long-term future of the company? And so it shows them that you did your research, and it also is a hardball for the senior leaders. And those are the types of questions that you want to vet before you pick a company, for sure.
One of the things that I did as well, and I don't know if this is standard advice, but it worked for me. I researched everybody that I was going to be interviewing with, and so my hiring manager, Kathy, I found that she had done talks on YouTube, and so I went and just watched all of the talks that she had given. I watched the talks that her boss had given. I kind of picked up on some of the lingo, and understood kind of what made her tick and like how she, what drove her. And that translated well, because I think for a lot of veterans, they just see it as a chance to break into the organization. But at the same time, you're kind of interviewing them as well. Like if it's not a great fit, you're not going to enjoy it. So that's advice that I have for hiring, or for veterans who are going through the hiring process as well, is don't just research the company, but research your boss, and make sure that person's good, because you can have another role within that company for a different boss and it's not that they're bad people. It's just they may not fit with you on your values, or they may not fit with you on the way you like to work. And so going that level deeper makes that hiring conversation a lot more productive, because you're literally, it's a two-way match. It's just not, I am trying to break into this company. I'm trying to, I'm trying to make sure I'm the right fit as well on the back end, and you'll have a better career that way.
Thank you. A lot of conversation there around the interviewing, preparation for the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. And that's part of the fit, knowing this is going to be a good company for you as well, and helping to nail the interview. But what about in terms of just thinking about the value? John talked a lot about knowing yourself and the value that you bring. And sometimes we're not even aware of the value that we bring. But looking back, like if you had hindsight now, what is that value that you really brought into the organization that's helped you to be successful, that maybe you didn't even recognize that you had, or that was such valuable skill set to bring?
Yeah, I think in the military, you will, in leaving, you may like discount the amount of leadership exposure you've had. And you've worked in, anyone in a 5-year or 10-year military career has probably worked for a dozen bosses. They've seen different ways of leading. They've been put in stressful situations. And then you are leaving, you're thrust into this new environment. One of the things that really resonated with me after about a year in the civilian business sector is like, people management is something that you don't get in a company like Intuit or Intel until you're fairly senior. You have to prove yourself as a marketer. You have to prove yourself as an HR person in that role for 4, 5, 6, 8 years before you get the chance to manage people. In the military, everyone manages somebody. And so having leadership experience and having like been through those stressful situations and being able to not lead from a structural standpoint, like, you have administrative oversight, but from like a functional perspective, in a meeting with peers and being able to step up and lead is something that I had discounted for myself going into the civilian business world, just because I thought it would take time to develop that, and those skills translate, and those things come out very quickly after you start in that new role.
Great answer. I'm going to move on unless one of you would like to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say some mistakes I made throughout my career, some battle scars, some wisdom from the old guy on the panel. Is I wish I had put more emphasis on assessment and talking to higher level professionals early on. I think that's a mistake that most veterans make, is they don't do the Hogan assessments, the Gallup Strength assessments. And I think an MBGT or a DISC, oh yeah, I know myself. About all that stuff is good for is knowing if you're an introvert or extrovert. It's not going to really help you pick the right job. And true professionals, there's a business of executive coaching, and half of them are great, and about 30% actually know what they're doing. And I wish I'd grabbed a hold of one of those and looked at their background, and if they had a track record of success in transitioning themselves, if they had breached industries and grown within industries and promoted in an upward trajectory, I would have put more time into them than my buddies or those that spend hours focusing on the stupid elevator pitches, resumes, and how to wear a red tie, and teaching from the lowest contracted facilitator guide. It's so very similar to universities. When you look at professors, the deans, the board, when you select your MBA program, I don't think veterans put the same level of attention to the transitioning experts that are out there.
So you're recommending a coach or working more deeply with someone who'll be honest with you again and really challenge you? Yeah,
and probably more senior level folks as well. Those that have been there, done that. Pay more attention to the battle scars than somebody who wrote a book and never did it themselves.
Mentoring is a good option. Robert, it looks like you want to add to this.
Yeah, I would say somewhere in the midst of what Phil has said and Justin has said in there is you want to focus in on how to articulate and understand your unique value proposition as you look at your military experience and be able to synthesize that and communicate it in a way that's effective and also helps you stay honest and true to what you bring to the table. There's going to be lots of different opportunities that may seem a little bit ambiguous at times as you approach corporate, but I think it's important to understand what you bring and make sure that as you're having those interviews, as you're growing in your career, are you remaining true to that? How are you growing? And how are you continuing to drive that understanding for yourself? Am I meeting this unique value proposition that I think I have? And is this job or is this opportunity going to allow me to really walk in that? Because I think it's very important, especially as you're transitioning, I call it kind of an anchor point in your career. You want to make sure that you have a good foundational start that you can look back on and find comfort and some level of belief that you can continue down this road. I think that's really important as you're starting out this new type of career, this new type of endeavor, whether you're going into entrepreneurship or into a corporate environment or some other opportunity.
Great. I love that. So why don't we use that as a transition to go into the next part of our conversation to talk about that hiring process. And Robert, I'd like to hear a little bit more from you, particularly as you look at hiring people into the organization from the diversity perspective, the disability perspective, or just in general. What do you look for in candidates to really believe that they're going to make that return on the investment into your organization?
In a very basic sense, you're going to be looking for, does that candidate meet the requirements of the position? Are they, do they have the skills that we're looking for? And then the second order of analysis is, do they fit into the culture? And how does that match up? Do their values align with our values? Those are things that are, I think, important for any type of hire. Is there a likelihood this candidate can stay? Do they have a long runway that they could be with the company? Because that is an investment you're making every time you hire, right? But I think for the military, and I kind of joked about this a little bit before, but how it's kind of a an interesting question nonetheless is, what is the ROI for veterans? And I mentioned it's very strong. And at Intel, we very closely articulated how the values and experiences that we see coming out of the military correlate to what we see and what we value at Intel, whether you're talking about quality or risk taking or inclusion or innovation. These are all things that are important. We strive to maintain a culture that takes into account many of these values, and we know that veterans bring that to the table. So for me, as I look at veterans coming in, I just want to make sure that they put their best foot forward, that they are not underselling themselves, that I'm doing the work that I need to do internally to make sure that our business partners understand how that skill could correlate. And I think it's an ever growing opportunity to continue to educate folks internally on the veterans, and to continue to have outreach to veterans to help make sure that they understand some of the things that they might not as they're looking to navigate that. So I think that work right there helps increase the return on investment, the internal influencing and the external kind of knowledge sharing.
Thank you. Justin, it looks like you'd like to jump in.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Robert touched on values alignment, and for us, we have our stated company values, and then we also have like things that are just prerequisite, like the kindergarten rules. Do you share? Do you help each other? Things like that. And then above our values, we have what we think of like as our multiplier traits. Do we make each other smarter? Do we help each other when times are tough? Do we help pick up the mood of the team? Can we shape the dynamic of a team when we're working on a problem? And so those are the traits that I value and I see in a lot of veteran hires. Robert also touched a little bit on the ROI. For me, when I'm making a hiring decision, I also think about the risk. So a hiring decision is one of the most risky things we do in business. It's difficult to unwind. It's you're making a commitment to that person, for several months. We're paying recruiting fees. We're training that person, and if at the end of that you find out not just that you can do the job. My industry, there's pretty clear tests you can do and certifications and work experience to check the box of can you do the job. I'm looking for people who go above and beyond that and will scale their impact and make the team stronger, make each other smarter, and make the organization stronger as a whole. And so for me, the risk that at the end of 6 months, we find out that that's not the type of person we've hired with a veteran is lower. Not to say that those skills don't exist in the civilian world. And we have lots of special people at our company who aren't veterans. But I think the type of person who raises their hand to serve the country and goes off and does those things can build and strengthen those skills as they go. And so for me, it's a ROI very clear as well. But at the end of the day, too, decreasing the risk helps increase the ROI when you're making multiple hiring decisions. And I'm proud to say we had 2 veterans start this week at Interlace. So something I'm personally proud about.
Awesome. There's some chat here that you're involved with, Phil. Did you want to bring any of that into the conversation?
No, I just like the back and forth between networking versus an elevator pitch. I was not qualified for the job I'm sitting in now. They required 10 years of pharmacy experience and 8 years number 1 HR experience, and I didn't have either. But I walked in through the military connection with the former CEO, and in my interviews described the journey with my father as he fought, and my participation in it and what it meant to me, what it meant to my family. I got open kimono, teary-eyed, vulnerable, which not a lot of veterans would admit, or panelists, but I got the job. As I was walking to the parking lot with the CEO who canceled two meetings in order to continue the conversation. So I think there is a difference between an elevator pitch, networking, and aligning to the values. And I like that Robert emphasize that. And sometimes the research into that, some companies are really bad at that stuff. That's critical from an HR guy. You know, everybody wants to be customer obsessed, data driven, raise the bar, all that kind of stuff. But you have to really do a lot of research, talk to a lot of folks to understand what it really looks and feels like inside that company. If you can hit on that during your process, you're probably going to win.
I love it. I know that's worked for me personally and most of the people that I've coached. And I think it goes back to knowing who you are and knowing what's important to you, because that will come through in that interview. It came through in those tears in your eyes, Phil. And so it will come through in the energy and what we bring. And people will want to hire you because they see that in you, the drive to work for their business and solve their problems. But this isn't about my opinion. Let's bring it back to the panel. Okay, should we move a little bit more and move into being in an HR role as you are right now, Phil, and have been for a long time? We have some HR folks in the audience, and part of this conversation is from the HR perspective, having that conversation to hire more veterans in the organization. But before we do that, I listened recently to a Workplace Warrior podcast, Phil, that you were interviewed on by Jordan Goldrich, and you talked about finding your why, your content, and your character. And we've touched a little bit of that already in this conversation, but I think this is a good time to ask you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of amazing veterans who are just really impressive. And, you know, they came out and they did, you know, a rotational program at a large company, but they never got to interact with the C-suite. It never really resonated with the product or the service they were providing. And, you know, after a year, you know, after their family said, "Oh, it's really impressive. You're working for a, you know, S&P 500 company or whatever," they were still miserable and moved on, and they didn't quite know why. Maybe it was their manager, which is, you know, one of the biggest reasons. But the reality is, it wasn't a higher purpose. It wasn't, and they didn't get to touch the patient. They didn't get to touch the customer themselves, and you know, it's just a big machine at the end of the day, which they could have stayed in the military and gotten the same juice. And so I think that's, you know, when I say start with your why, the Simon Sinek stuff, I think that bears, you know, more attention, more purpose. I wish more transitioning programs put professional effort into that. The assessments, the deep interviews, the candid conversations you have with those that are close to you, and really understanding what's important to you, and not, you know, not everybody coming out of the military needs to be a dang project manager, for God's sakes. You know, so more emphasis on the squishy stuff will help you figure it out quicker. Build your personal board of advisors, of truth tellers, and those with a lot of battle scars. Why stumble into it your own, or listening to your buddies who are clueless and they just want you to drink the spoiled milk too? We all want more veterans to join us, even though we believe our company and the mission may, you know, we're secretly hating life, but I'll still convince a buddy to come join me. That's such a military thing. It cracks me up. And then, you know, lastly, you've got to understand the financial and political world. You really do. I keep seeing veterans joining DoD only revenue streams right now. Do you think that's smart? Or infrastructure or commercial real estate? Because 10 years ago, their big brother did it or their dad did it. If you're going into concrete and steel right now, I beg forgiveness, but you're not reading enough business material. And so you got to play a career like the stock market, and you got to really connect those dots.
Okay. Justin, it looks like you want to say something.
No, that's hard to follow. And I love I was thinking through the phases of a military veteran transition, and Phil just like nipped every single one of them. So like the first phase is you're trying to figure out what's out there. Most veterans get told that they're good at project management, so they're going to go and be a project manager. Most veterans I talk to are evaluating that. A lot of people find like great success in that, but like a lot of people, they'll do it, and it's not what's connected to their why. So that second stage is really about what Phil described as finding your circle, like your you need a cohort of other veterans that you're transitioning at the same time as, so you can empathize and you can swap notes and things like that. But you need to progress past that and find a circle of people who are going to tell you hard truths, whether that's like, career advice at Rady School, whether that's the Honor Foundation, whether that's any of the other like, well-run veteran services, or Phil mentioned personal board of advisors, who are going to tell you the things you don't want to hear. And so that's to me provided a ton of value, and something that I've given back. And I know Phil was a name that came up when I was transitioning. Like, you got to call this guy; he's going to tell you what you need to hear. I can't I can't say enough about all the people in the veteran community who do that. And it's something that you don't need just once; you need it over and over again. And so for me, that's something that you don't do when you're in the military. You don't reach out. You want to progress through the machine, but you don't take the time to pull up and say, okay, what's really going to make me happy, and where can I really go? And there's not one path that's going to work for you. There's multiple paths, and it doesn't matter which path you're on, as long as you're making progress down the path and you're finding the right path for you. Your first job is not going to be your forever job, but you want to make sure it's something that's going to get you propelled down that path that you're going to find value in. And for me, I had a hard time. I was loving my role. I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and it just wasn't aligned with my personal purpose. And that's what I found. I found my way back to that after a few years, and so I resonated with Phil's story on that personally.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and Linda, you asked me to address the HR population, so I just circling back. Forgive me, but just to throw a little in that direction is, don't focus so much on trying to translate resumes and acronyms. You'll never win that. Everybody's tried to solve it since I've been in this game, and it's coming up on 20 years, and I don't think it's ever going to get solved. So stop it, and focus on the knowledge that. The veteran talent pool is like any talent pool. There's top 10% and top 25%. We call it early promote, must promote, hand selected, deep selected, the types of roles and career hook and jives that were clearly meant for the best performers. I wish I could say all vets are awesome. And I always hear that rhetoric and I just shake my head, because they're not. They're just not. So stop it. Everybody just stop it. There's some real duds. Trust me. And so you got to figure that out. And then, you wouldn't hire, and then there's some commonalities, right? Culture versus culture, of community versus your company. Those that are awesome at Microsoft or Intuit may not be awesome at an Amazon or a LifeTech, because they are different. And what makes success over here will not make success over here. I can tell you that firsthand. And so, really understanding that and understanding yourself and figuring out, what kind of veteran you need for your organization. Just don't hire a vet. If you're a startup and you've got chaos and it's never been done before, I probably wouldn't hire a conventional or a nuke type of person from the military. I'd probably be better with spec ops or pilots, which is why Sarah Rhodes leads Primare, why Stu Zern brought in the robotics at Amazon, why, there's some trends there that, you can align as an HR professional. If if you're hiring for HR, if you're hiring for finance, if you're hiring for certain functions in your organization and your culture of your organization, I could probably point you in the right direction of which talent pools in the military are probably going to yield the best success for you.
I love that. So it's still looking at talent on a resume. It's just understanding what the person did in the military for the fit. Great. I love it. This is just, we could go on all day, but I know there's a lot of questions in the chat for sure. We can do a really super quick wrap up at the end, if we just like 10 seconds after we take some questions. I think it's really important we hear what's coming in. Ted, do you want to help us out with that?
Can I just take a quick second? I wanted to add or maybe reiterate something that's come up a few times. Sometimes people from different communities and diverse backgrounds and communities in particular, they can discount information that they think is, just tied to their community if they want to try to get something outside of it. And Philip's done a great job of kind of painting that picture for the different things that are out there, the stuff that's good, the stuff that's not. But I would say this concept of a board of directors, this personal board of directors, this isn't just good advice for veterans. This is good advice that I've heard given for all types of employees and people looking to grow their career. If you can establish that, go for it. And that's all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you. No, that's really valuable. I think there was just a lot of chatter going on when we were talking, and Ted would say, hey, don't forget about questions from the audience. We can keep going, Ted. Are there some questions to address?
Yeah, we just got our first one from Eddie, and it goes, this question is more related to your personal experience. How did you reflect on your talent sets, experience, education, and passion to decide what to do as your next career? And fortunately, Eddie is at Rady and has Linda to guide tons of that stuff, but we'll open that up to panelists to say what tools are the most effective in developing and understanding your, quote, squishy stuff.
For me, it was the truth teller. I started by building houses in Las Vegas as a SWO engineer and former blue collar dude that grew up in a construction based family. The guy that walked into the room at the Orion International Job Fair event had deployed with me, and he was a 06 reserve and a vice president at this big Fortune construction company, and he remembered me and said, Phil, I remember you talking about building churches with your grandpa and all this other stuff. And so he threw me in there. And then 2 years later, him and the big dog, the CHRO who had just come from Pepsi, flew into Vegas, and he offered me a job in HR. And I remember my response. I said, Rich Rodriguez, I said, Rich, are you freaking kidding me? Like, you know me and you want me to go and do, have I done bad? I thought I was crushing it. Like, you want me to be a yeoman? I'm sorry if there's any yeoman or person-omen on the call, but if you knew me, you would understand that's not me. And I'm a bit of a troublemaker, and I'm a bit of a plate breaker. And you want me to go? I had no idea what HR was. And then Rich said one thing that was very powerful. He goes, you're so clueless. You've been in business for 2 years after your transition. You don't even know what HR is. Goes, it's a J3 shop. It's not even an N1 or an S1 shop. He put it in my language. He punched me in the face. He grabbed me by the back of the neck and said, you need to do this or you're an idiot. And because he's a truth teller and I respected him and he knew my background and I knew his, I paid attention. And, having those C daddies and truth tellers, working next to you, that is so critical. Absolutely critical.
So for those who don't understand what a sea daddy is, it's your buddy that you get really tight with on a ship that's going to help you not make a complete fool out of yourself when you're on the ship.
Well, it's not. That's your sea buddy. Your sea daddy is typically the CO or the Commodore who's watching, who knows you and you interact and they watch out over you. And then one day they're a 4-star and they bring you onto their staff as a senior watch officer or their chief of staff. And so those are the folks that are up in the C-suite that have a trajectory of their own, and you grab a hold of them because they have 20 years plus of wisdom, and you need to listen to it.
So don't be afraid to ask others how they see you and what's so great about you, so you can help to find your way.
Yeah, because that's been my job for years, is going internal to the veterans, because I'm at a point now where candidly I can't focus on transitioning vets. I've got a personal journey now where I prefer to help veterans crack the director and VP level, because it seems to be more challenging for vets to get to that level than it is to get a job. There's a huge cliff at director level, and so that's my battle right now, is to help folks. And it's like, I go to folks and say, hey, I've watched you for a couple of years now in the company. I think you'd be great in marketing. And it's the same experience. Like, what? I'm like, yeah, here's why. And then there's a big light bulb moment. So I'm more interested in, what's next. I think somebody brought it up earlier. Your first job won't be your last, for sure. Most of the time. And it's a chess game. And if you screw it up and go all out with your pawns, you're not going to bring the queen out. You're not going to make it.
One of the things, and I think this is Eddie's question, is what are you doing, like, in your spare time? What are you doing for free that you get value out of. Like, a lot of people try to think, and especially in the military, you're so ingrained in the culture and the mission, and it's exciting, and you're giving back, and you're saving the world. And then you go to a civilian career, and unless it's deeply, deeply, deeply aligned with your purpose and your why, and Phil, I think, gave this example where he had to have somebody else like connect the dots for him. You're going to need something else outside of that to fill that void. And so you want to make sure as best you can to deeply align your purpose with what it is you're doing. If you're looking for that and you're transitioning and you're looking for the next job, I would take a look inside and see what things you're doing for free or what things you're doing that you get value out of. Is it coaching others? Is it giving back? And then look for companies or look for roles where you can do that. And then like be honest with yourself and see, okay, you may need to be doing some, helping a nonprofit on the side or giving back in another way. And I think just like being honest about that is journey. I worked for a very mission driven company, and I found that I still needed more.
I think one thing I would add to the question is, don't try to be what you think others want you to be.
Mm-hmm.
Try to be, who you are, and whether your CBED is what Phil talked about, or in my case, part of that board of advisors, actually my 6-year-old daughter, asking simple questions like, "Do you like what you're doing?" And when you have to answer that for your child, it's definitely pretty eye-opening when you reflect on that. Do you like what you're doing? And it tends to calibrate you, because you only have a period of time with your family, your kids, and stuff like that. And you want to make sure what you're doing outside of the home. If you're coming from the military, I always think there's nothing that has stakes like the military, bar none. There's nothing. So the next step down from that is whatever your next job is, and you had a commitment to that. You wanted to see that through. And now this time that you're spending outside of the home, it's got to count. So I think that's an important thing to consider and reflect on, and make sure that you have people holding you accountable to that, not just some idealized version of yourself, but who you really are.
Absolutely. Just checking the chat here.
Yeah, I don't see a ton of questions. I kind of have one from our pre-talk. Robert, you really made me think about this, and I mentioned it in our intro. Phil and Justin, maybe you can add a little bit, but we go back to as our preparation and having that conversation. Robert, you said Intel's a bunch of introverts, and so where Justin's looking for people with a lot of gusto and coming in there like my type of extroverted loudness, you're like, Intel, maybe not so much. So you got to kind of like build that network. What have y'all's experiences been in trying to understand not only the corporate culture, but the general personality of the corporation in these preparations, and how does that work?
I interviewed with Intel and KLA 10 Core when I was getting out, because I was a chief engineer, and I thought I used to be pretty smart, and so they gave me a shot. Semiconductor was a hot industry at the time, and certainly a lot of my friends were focused on it. Back in that day, it was extreme growth. It's still right now very healthy. And I remember at the end of the day, I won't say which one, but I asked, when you crush a project, what do you guys do to celebrate? You go to a bar, is there a barbecue at the boss's house? Some of the best wardroom type of environments I've been a part of, there's a celebration, right? No, we don't do any of that. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to fit in here. So I think that's a very valuable statement. You learn as you progress in your career what kinds of questions to nonchalantly ask, maybe while you're walking down the hall or being escorted to the next interview. Sometimes those little things are more important than the formal stuff in between.
Yeah, I would echo that and kind of restate some of the comments I made in our pre-run. We do have a bit of introverts here at Intel. We're an engineering company by nature, and you find that more prevalent, right, within that skill set. And so as you're coming out, as you're looking at opportunities, you want to try to understand the culture. You want to try to understand, there's different cultures and within the organizations within a larger company as it is, and you want to understand that. So when you do have the opportunity to engage with and I can even look at this at companies I've worked for in the past. I have had one experience with that company within one business division, and yet there's a whole different type of that company and different way that looks, and different even attributes of how people engage, what they measure. I always think that the people working in finance are having the time of their lives, but there's other aspects of the business where it's more about, we went after the results. When I worked in logistics, it was all about the results and the execution. We were not going to be the ones that got, the big, the marketing campaign that we just sold this product, but that product didn't make it to the customer if we didn't do our job. People working on Christmas, to make sure stuff gets out to the stores and stuff like that. So it really goes back to that initial comment that we had, and even going back to John's presentation about knowing yourself. What does recognition mean for you? What does success mean for you? Some places they have steaks and big parties when something great happens. Some places you get that email from a senior leader and no one else knows about it, but you do. And sometimes you just know you did a great job, right? And it's really about understanding what that looks like and the different opportunities that you have present, and being true to what's important for you. Because you're not going to have a great time if you don't like being around a bunch of people, for example, celebrating something when you want to get back to work and get it done. So you have to figure that out.
Awesome, y'all. So Linda, I think we have 2 minutes for a wrap up. So over to you, and then we'll take our quick break before the breakout group.
All right. Yeah, let's wrap it up. And, I want to appreciate that we didn't focus on how do you write a good resume, right? Could have gone in that direction. I'm glad we didn't. That's another conversation. But show the passion, show your eagerness, show the whole you. And you're sort of that irresistible hire, in my opinion. But it's not my opinion. Let's hear from the closing remarks from the team. Let's do it in the same order we started in. We'll do Justin, Robert, and Phil. Bring it home. What didn't you say that you wanted to say, or what do you want to reiterate?
Yeah, I want to reiterate the whole person. We spent this majority of this conversation talking about veterans and the skills and things like that veterans espouse and the veterans exhibit, but that's not the whole you. So when I started my career journey, like my first resume, and we're not going there, but the first resume out of the gate was just military, and I realized that military is important, but what makes me tick is innovation. What makes me tick is serving others. What makes me tick is the strengthening the team dynamics and giving back. And so bring that out in the resume. Or in the interview. Bring that to bear. You're for the HR folks in the audience, veterans, it's a part of their journey. They're on a long career journey. It's one part of their career. They've got amazing skills. But it's not the entire person. So look beyond that.
Thank you. Awesome. Philip says, take a look at his LinkedIn profile. There's a little color there. You'll learn a little about him.
Yep.
Robert?
Yeah, a couple of things that I would say is veterans and what we've talked about and the value of veterans clearly establish a high floor of talent to be pulling from, with the skills, capabilities, and experience they're exposed to, and also the stakes. Like I said, there is no environment where you have the stakes that people in the military do. And I appreciate everyone that has volunteered and given their time to serve this country. My brother-in-law is a veteran, and we have a lot of conversations about some of those things and some of the costs. And I have a lot of veteran friends. So having lived in Fort Bragg for several years, that's gonna be the case. But I also want to encourage our corporate partners, our fellow HR folks. Veterans are not monolithic groups of people. There's so many different possibilities within that community, and you want to do the time. We're asking veterans to do the time, due diligence on that side to try to understand the companies, but also do the due diligence to understand that community. Help understand how it can translate to where you operate. And I would offer, even use veterans that you have in your workforce if you need help shaping that picture, because you don't want to miss the opportunity. And then back to the veterans, be honest with yourself, be thorough in your research, and don't undersell yourself. You have a lot to offer.
Thank you.
Yeah, equity. Didn't normally I try to squeeze in a quick cram session on equity, and I'll do that two ways. One, nothing like starting at an Amazon at $41 a share, and then hitting and having an amazing midlife crisis where you can work for a charity giving back to veterans for a couple years. And so pay attention to equity. Happy to connect and share with you how to identify those opportunities. Life Tech was another one. I'm hoping this is my my hat trick at Dendreon. And the other way is I have two very close friends here in town. One went to work at General Atomics, and one went to work at Illumina in early stages, and they now live in much different neighborhoods. But they're both very equal in resumes and capabilities, and so it's it'll change your life if you pay attention to that stuff, and it'll allow you to do more and give back in different ways later.
Thank you. I'm inspired. Thank you, all three of you. Clearly, you're very focused on giving back and making a difference, and that all the thoughts that you've provided today were just so insightful, so right on. Thank you. The comments in the chat are very full of applause for all three of you. Thank you very much for sharing your time today.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're going to get put in your breakout room, and whoever's the first one who wants to start, please take your values exercise and go down to the part where you've identified your top values and you've developed some stories. So pick one, maybe two, tell them what that value is. We had a great part of this conversation about defining who you are in order to best transition. And this is really what this tool is used for. So what values do you need in an organization, and how do you translate those? So pick one or two of those values and tell a story. Tell your story from either your personal life or your professional life where you've used that value or you've espoused that value, or that value was a key part in your decision-making process while you were in that situation. Everybody take about 2 minutes to do that. And then we'll go into these the breakout room questions. So veterans, what are the biggest challenges in your transition to civilian work? How can this group support you? Human resources, what difficulties do you encounter when hiring veterans or non-veterans? How do you determine if a candidate is the right attributes for the role? The hiring manager, what difficulties do you encounter when hiring veterans or non-veterans? What goes into your decision to hire a candidate? And then what brought, for business professionals, what brought you here today, and what is your experience working with vets? How can this group support you? So we did a lot of good stuff. We started with the business case for veterans. We moved to good stories about how we transition, how we sell ourselves, how we talk about really defining who we are. And then we're going to end with what's hard. What do we need work with? Maybe somebody in that room is going to turn out to be a coach or a good asset for you in the future. So please take this time to really dive a little bit deep into these questions. And myself, Elaine, Linda will be on the outside. So if you need a call for help, we'll pop into the rooms and get that part facilitated. We'll give you all about a half hour to do this. We'll bring everybody back, and then we're going to post a poll and say, which one of these questions did you guys talk about the most? And then at that point, we'll have a group discussion about what was discovered, what your thoughts are, and where you guys can help each other get better connected and better understanding in the business landscape for veterans. So with that, Fellaine, if you could pop us into breakout rooms, we'll be here to monitor and stand by to help. All right, y'all, welcome back. I hope the breakout discussions left you saying, I really just wanted to have another 5 minutes to have continue this conversation. That was the goal. We really wanted to leave all of these discussions with kind of a little bit of a cliffhanger where you want more, because we want you to go out and engage more. We want you to network. We want you to talk to the next person and really dive into some of these things that we explored over the last 3 hours. So we've got 20 minutes left. What I ask you to do is please go to menti.com. Go to menti.com. You'll see it on the screen, and use the code that's on the screen. And it's basically just going to put up the questions that y'all just finished talking about. And as those pop up, we're going to pick the top one or two, and I'm going to open it up to whoever wants to throw your name in the chat box, and I'll click you, and please, we'd love your input. We want this to be the big final group discussion. So this is our way to wrap up and kind of put a cap on, hey, I was really thinking about this one thing during John's talk or during the panel, or in my group discussion, so-and-so said this amazing thing that I think was really important and I'd like to expand on it. So this is our opportunity to kind of to wrap this up as a team and a group and send us off feeling good. Last year we had 16-ounce cans of beer from Protector Brewery with Sean. Unfortunately, this year we're COVID bound. So if you happen to have an emergency can of beer next to your desk, please feel free to bust it out and have a drink. This is our networking time and our time to really finish up what we're doing here. So any questions? I don't see anybody with responses yet. Oh, we got one.
You just have to put in the code once you get to menti.com.
What's the code?
It's at the top there, 5660-6906.
All right, so I think we'll start with the first one that seems to be the dominating factor. I know we've got a lot of vets in this group. So who wants to open it up with what are the biggest challenges you face in transitioning to the civilian workforce? And if you can add, hey, I faced this challenge and this is what I did to overcome it, I think that'd be fantastic. Anybody?
Do we just start talking? All right, so Robert Sweetman here. One of the things that we talked about was my first, so I worked at a company called CTI for 15 months. And when I put together my resume, I noted it was like a page on leadership. And, reflecting on that, I kind of laugh at myself because it was so dumb. I missed everything that they probably wanted to hear about me. So in creating a new resume for a company where I can go speak on the topic of sleep, I really learned from my first go around and dug into the skills that would apply specifically to that job set and really unpacked a lot of that, which is sometimes uncomfortable, and put together a more well-rounded application so that I can communicate the skills that apply to that job better to the hiring interviewer.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Do we have anybody else that wants to tag on to that?
Yeah, I just want to jump in here real quick, Ted. We had a really good discussion, our breakout. And I know Robert with Intel, he gave some really good information. I want to say sorry, Sean Sadler, that we weren't able to get too much comments from you on this, but we were asking some questions about when veterans, and I could take this from personal experience, when you transition, veterans have so much value to add, but sometimes it's not exactly pinpointed because going from the military into the civilian sector isn't, necessarily a linear transition of skill set. And so some veterans need to explore different options, right? And so what we asked Robert was, in his experience with HR, when hiring veterans, is there anything in a contract clause that says, okay, I'm applying for this specific position here, and I will do this job to the best of my ability. And, and Robert said, as long as it's not a conflict of interest within the company, usually you have the freedom, if you go to HR and you're an engineer, you usually have the freedom to maybe like do something on the side to explore like what you naturally want to do, because you may not understand exactly what you want to do. Maybe it's in real estate or like acting, like Robert was saying. And he said that usually companies are open to that as long as you do your job and your skill set. Because I think at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is, this is my opinion, but the ultimate goal of anything is to figure out, know thyself, right? What do I really want to do with my time that is the most impactful with the people around me, right? And that could be anything from sweeping the floors to being a CEO. And as long as you find your groove in something, that may take time, but in the reality, I mean, me being an entrepreneur, and you have to pay the bills. And so you have to work your job, put food on the table, provide for your family, but you also have something else that, like, if you're not exactly where you want to be, in my opinion, it's worth exploring, and it's going to take a little bit more work to do that. And we had just a really good discussion on, from an HR perspective, because I don't have any expertise in that field and I've never worked in that field. But as long as companies, when you're a veteran, to be hired, I mean, your skill set's amazing. And you may even find something, if you apply for one position in a company, you may be able to find something within that same company that you say, well, I applied for this position, but what I've learned over the last year is that I really want to do this. And he did confirm that there's a lot of potential for those scenarios. So I just wanted to throw that out and say, like, you know, really good group discussion. Thank you, Robert, for that feedback.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I would say it will vary by company, what types of non-compete agreements there may be in place. And you do have to understand that picture, because you definitely don't want to violate that as an employee of the company. But there are opportunities to explore how you can, leverage that skill set and your interests. So just be mindful of that. Try to understand that, especially if that's important to you for the opportunities you're entertaining.
So how was the values worksheet as an icebreaker for y'all? What did you gain, or did you learn anything in terms of how to talk about what you've done or yourself in a way that's relatable? Okay. How about we go on to the next one? Does anybody have something for that one?
Well, I was going to answer you, Ted, there. I think that, this is just another good exercise, and, kind of reflecting on what value, I feel like every time I do these, my values kind of change a little bit, depending on the subject of the exercise. So I think that this was a good way to reflect on those values and keep it relevant to this specific audience. And it kind of, in our breakout rooms, I also found it pretty interesting that at least one of each of my values that I identified was shared by at least one other person in the same group. So I don't know if that's just because, we were all but one of our people in my breakout room was veterans. So maybe it's just a common thread with veterans. But yeah, I think that this values-based exercise was useful for this specific event.
Great, thanks, Eddie. So we have a couple HR professionals and hiring managers in here. Would any of you like to talk about kind of what you've learned either in this event or in your breakout groups, and kind of how that second question was, how you were able to answer that, and what you found difficult or what you've learned that has worked?
This is Angie. I'm willing to jump in. So, I often am working with my hiring managers and my interview teams, and even my talent acquisition team on how do we recruit for a diverse workforce. And being in the biotech industry, we can tend to go towards the same avenues because we may be looking for specific scientific experience. And one of the exercises that we do as we try to find new avenues for sourcing candidates that are diverse and from underrepresented communities within our workforce is we talk about the myths that we have. And so what was interesting for me was the group I was with, how many folks had autonomy as one of the values. And being a Navy brat myself, I was actually thinking autonomy wouldn't be a value of people coming out of the military. So it was a learning lesson for myself going through this. I actually feel like the tool is really good. I told the folks on my team that, remember, you're not just interviewing for the position, you're also interviewing this company to see if they're the right company for you. And so really know what your values are. Take the time to do even an exercise like this to make sure that you're ending up in a place that you are going to be able to thrive and contribute to. One of the things that I find sometimes when I get resumes, or I get contacted from somebody who is especially currently transitioning from a military role into a corporate organization, is that they're putting all of their experience in military terms. And you need to find that common language, and you need to find the story of even if you're educating me on a military term, I need to know the story of how that's a transferable skill, because I may look at this resume and not know what the military term is. And if I'm getting 200 resumes, I don't necessarily have the time to look at each one. So I really would have people think about, hey, if I'm putting a military term in there, do I have a story to tell behind that translates to the corporate world? And if you're not sure how it translates to the corporate world, get a mentor who can help you learn those translations.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Angie. I appreciate you participating and the valuable insight on autonomy. I think most people view vets as robots that say yes, sir, and go do exactly what we're told, when really we're acting in vacuums of information and having to make decisions that guess later, but at least we have some ability to make a decision in the now. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have a question from Owen, and he's asking a question regarding taking a break after getting out. So Owen, are you talking about taking some time off and going climbing a mountain or something?
Something like that. I mean, yeah, the idea of just once you're out, how much time do you need? And that's kind of a personal, in the moment kind of question. But then also, how much time starts to raise red flags on, say, from an HR or a company's perspective? If you take 3 months off, is that okay? 6 months, a year, like, of doing nothing but traveling, let's say, or just doing, like, rekindling a relationship with your family, or fill in the blank, or is that not palatable from a company's perspective?
Anybody have some insights? I am not anywhere close to qualified to answer that question.
I don't look at a period of time necessarily. I, again, look at the story. Can you tell me what you did during that period of time and why it enriched you and made you ready to join my company at this, or our company at this time? I've hired people who have taken a year off, and they've been able to tell that story, and we feel like, wow, that was a really good year off. And I've interviewed other people who took 3 to 6 months off, and they can't tell the story, and I wonder if they're ready to come to work now. So I think it's really about you being able to tell the story, what you did during that time that enriched you, so that you're capable of joining our company.
Thank you. And that's not the first time, even during this meeting, where people mentioned being able to tell a story. So it makes me want to go find a storytelling course I could take, per se.
Yeah, there's a great one that Rady offers, and if you're part of the MBA program, and there's some other good ones with that. But really, the storytelling in the work that we've done here and the work that I've done comes down to your values. And like when you're looking at that job position description, or you're looking and you're researching the company and you read their corporate values, how do those corporate values resonate with you? And then how do you describe in what the feedback that I got from an interviewer was 90 seconds or less. If I stop writing something, I don't care anymore. How do I describe what that value is in what I did, and why that applies and why that's important? So, it kind of all comes back to it seems that there's less importance on I was the mission officer for this thing and accomplished this thing, and more importance on what'd you learn, how'd you do it, and why did you do it that way? And so I think it's an interesting mindset shift when you're going out and transitioning. So Linda just said Simon Sinek offers veterans $25 rate on his Finding Your Why program, which is an awesome thing. And then there's tons of opportunities for online resources. So are there any other questions or follow-ups? I don't see anything coming in here for questions. Anybody have anything final that they'd like to talk about or leave us with?
I just threw something in the chat that might be good. Philip said to look at his LinkedIn profile about section as a way to sell yourself and your why. And I just read it, and I think it's great. It's hard not to like that guy, even if you've never met him, after reading the about section on his LinkedIn profile. It's very real, it's very relatable, it's strong. I think that was a really good suggestion from him.
Another interesting LinkedIn profile that's a Rady alum, MBA veteran is Clay Tresca. He is fighting cancer, and he personally fought cancer. And when you read his why, you know it's not a job, it's a way of life. So I say Clay Tresca. I can put it in chat. That's another good example. So your resume is more nuts and bolts, facts and figures. Your LinkedIn is a chance to tell the world a little bit more about who you are.
Well, I have a question on that because I've read some articles. Mine's a little bit more shorter and more succinct than his is. What's the length on the about me? Is there too long?
Am I supposed to jump in, or somebody else? Somebody on the call?
I think that depends on the reader. When it comes down to, is that too long? Is the story compelling enough to sustain the engagement? A lot of times people are looking to understand a little bit about you, but I imagine they're also looking at the skills. So how does that all tie itself together? I would probably recommend against having like a full-on publication there. I think the more clarity around what you're messaging, the better, because people aren't going to always have the most time. But if you're trying to calibrate for the wide pool of folks, but yeah, I think it's somewhat subjective to the reader and the story being told.
I think that's a great answer. And that's kind of the way I approach it. Like, this is kind of about me, and you can get all the other detail below. You know, the experience will tell you the story on what you've done technically. So that's how I've approached it. But yeah, I've read articles on the about me, and they definitely say don't go too long, like you just said. So I was curious because I like this as well, but it was pretty lengthy. So appreciate the answer.
Good question.
I think, like Angie said, you know, the HR representative needs to be able to read it quickly, understand it, and see how your skills can apply to their company. And what Phil was doing is about is bullet pointed. It reads quickly. It's a little long, but you know, you don't mind reading it. Like Robert was saying, it's how that story is told to keep your interest, rather than worrying about the length so much. It's the conversation that you're having with the reader and engaging them that matters.
That makes sense. Thank you.
If you're in a job search mode, LinkedIn also offers premium free for a year. There's another one for you. If you're a veteran, pick your year.
Wonderful tools. Yeah, premium free, the tools on interviewing and the videoing, everything that they give you feedback on your answers is phenomenal. And you could spend days refining what you want to say and how you tell your story. It's very useful. It's worth the money.
Well, it's free for veterans for a year as well, and they have an entire huge section on veteran transition that has a lot of really good details.
They also have LinkedIn Learning that you'll get free for a year. So if you want to pick up a skill set in something particular, you know, outside of the MBA or whatever else you're doing, you read in the job description that X is required, you can hop onto LinkedIn Learning and you can grab something.
Are there any services, Linda, that actually do that for you, right? Where you hire a professional to write your why for your resume, for your LinkedIn profile, rather than trying to learn it on your own?
There are services that will do it for you. I like the last part of your question. Services will teach you to do it so you can do it for yourself. Part of the process of writing a resume or a LinkedIn is sort of digging deep and thinking about who you are. Right? It's what are you going to say that you believe to be true that you want to carry forward into the next chapter of your life. It's not just historical. It's about what do you want to do going forward. And so I think you should write your own resume, and I think you should write your own LinkedIn, but definitely get some help. And if that's really hard for you, then sit with somebody, a coach or a writer, or come see me if you're in the Rady program. The Muse, I'll put that in the chat, is a career site online that I like a lot. Harvard Business Review has articles on everything that's really good. But yeah, LinkedIn even has tips on writing LinkedIn profiles as well.
Eddie is going to be rocking it as the new president of the Veterans Association. Ryan Kovac is the vice president. And so I'd also like to thank Jason Fetish, who he and I worked together for the last 2 years and really trying to work the veteran aspect and the veteran program at Rady. And it's really cool to see what we've done in 2 years. So thank you all for your participation. And then I'll be hanging out for the next 5 minutes or so if anybody has any other questions. But thanks again, y'all, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for putting this together. It was great.